Now let's talk about the hard-coded section of the EMR, which would be with respect to diagnosis codes and CPT codes. Diagnosis codes are typically found under assessment. Diagnosis codes can be arranged however you wish. In this case, it's arranged alphabetically. And you can do this using the modalities described in the personalization and customizations video. Here we have a list of diagnoses. If we wish to add a new diagnosis code, we would not click the plus button in the upper right corner. Whenever you see a button with ellipsis, it's always preferable to click on that button rather than the plus button. And you'll see in one moment why that's the case. If I click on this, it's going to pull up a different window than if I had clicked on the plus button instead. And I'll do that right now. If I click on the plus button, it opens up the entire Add Level 2 window. In this case, we have an ellipsis button which says this is specific for this section, and we'll add a code that is specific for diagnoses. So we can search this by typing in any specific code, or we can search using partial words. Once we find the code we're looking for, we can click it and click Add. And it will add it to the bottom of the list, as with any level 2. Once we have our diagnosis code, we can click it, and you'll notice below this section that we now have D1 through D8 in the level 2 down. The way that this works is by a system of pointers. We must always designate one of these pointers to any of the diagnoses that we select. D1 stands for primary diagnosis, D2 would be secondary, D3 tertiary, and so forth. I'll select my primary diagnosis as the one that I just checked, and then I'll move on to select another diagnosis as my secondary, and a third diagnosis as my tertiary. You must be aware that this cursor must be blinking next to the diagnosis that you checked in order for the level 2 down to be pulled into it as a pointer. If, for example, I click on this diagnosis and then for some reason click the scroll bar or click away, notice that you still have the level 2 down D1 through D8. However, if you check it, it won't pull into the note. You need to always make sure that the cursor is blinking before you select the pointer to make sure that the pointer actually does get into the note. And once you do that, you're done with the diagnosis section. Then we can move on to the CPT code selection. That's typically under Plan, under a heading called Billing or CPT. In this case, we see it's under Billing. Let's select Medication Administration. And from here, we have a very long list of CPT codes that we'd like to cut down a little bit by typing into the search bar at the top. Again, as soon as we begin typing in here, it'll begin to cut down our selection for us. And this search bar is located throughout all level 2s in this field, so it works just as well in any other category. So let's go ahead and select a couple of CPT codes for this visit. Once we select any CPT code, we have a section for modifiers in the level 2 down. And level 2 right we can see holds our diagnoses from D1 through D4. And you'll attach with whichever diagnoses are relevant to this CPT code. Doesn't particularly matter which order you do it in, as long as you attach it correctly as shown. Again, if for some reason you click on the level 2 component and then you click on the scroll bar or you click out so that the cursor no longer shows up, and you click on any of these, it will check the level 2 right, but it will not pull it in. In this case, this diagnosis and thus CPT code are not going to be shuttled to the billing section. So remember, make sure that this cursor is blinking before you select your level 2 right. And once it looks like this, you're all set with your diagnosis codes and your CPT codes. Your super bill is complete, and you can move on to charting as discussed. The action that will shuttle this information to the billing portion is to save this chart as complete. Once we do that, it will lock the chart, and the information that we have put in here for CPT codes, modifiers, diagnosis codes, all of that information goes to billing where we'll submit a claim. Saving functionality will be discussed in a later video.